officer sent me the catalog with that illustration. Because that clock, that style clock, became very popular out here on the West Coast in about 1906.
It's very cloudy this morning.
This is the one I saw the photographs of. Let's get my head over the harbor.
Yeah, I see the flags there. The weather is Take a good look at the pendulum on this. That was reproduced by Pete Sorensen, the local street clock guy and machinist primarily. The original pendulum was a Mercury pendulum. I don't think they did. That's a Howard movement. The clock's Mayer, but it was a Howard movement. The other thing that was interesting about the original movement was that Mayer put his name tag over here in the corner, and it said Joseph Mayer and Company, which would have been after 1923. It's the only time I know of that Mayer ever put his name directly on a Howard movement. It was on this clock.
Bushed all the way to the top.
Yeah, and that on the Model Zero, I think the Model Zero was bushed all the way up. The 00 is the small one. We're not. The one down there in Pioneer Square that was the Jerry Martin bushing.
You've got to see this.
So kind of a cross-like union here, and it was, did you say stolen?
Wasn't it stolen?
Well, it was vandalized, and yes, and parts of the movement were stolen, okay. That's right, yeah. Yeah, the clock itself was not.
No,
I mean, do you consider the whole superstructure of the clock? Yeah. It did, yeah, and it was gone. And then Chuck worked for a long time on making it work, and it was a bit of a challenge, wasn't it, Chuck? We went back and forth over almost a year to get it right.
I think, Pete was, we shipped it out to Pete.
Yeah.
And there were some problems in the shipping, I think, is what happened.
Yeah.
There was a couple of small parts that were bent, and then we repaired those, and then you were good to go.
Yeah.
And then Pete did the pendulum, right?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful job on it.
Yeah, isn't that great? So, you probably know that this was originally located down on 4th Avenue in downtown Seattle, not far probably from where you met Mr. Bridge.
Yeah, right around the corner.
Right around the corner.
Right.
Carroll's Jewelers was a small family-owned firm that closed about, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years ago, and there was some hope that maybe a whole bunch of the company's memorabilia and artifacts and even parts of this shop could be preserved, but it really wasn't practical given the scale of it. And the move of the clock was actually quite a challenge because it required taking down some utilities and, stopping traffic, and was quite an undertaking. I blanked out on most of it, but I just remember it took the better part of a Saturday very early and ending very late, and we moved it basically across town and resituated it. There was a lot of concern about vandalism and damage to the clock when we moved it, because it was going from a very prominent location downtown with a lot of eyeballs on it, and the occasional police walking by, to a lovely lakeside setting, but one that was really out of sight, and we were afraid it might be not so much out of mind as in the minds of people that wanted to do damage to it. And sure enough, on the very one day that the museum, as a public institution, we are open a lot, pretty much every day of the year, except one day, well, 2 days. We're closed on Thanksgiving, and we're also closed on Christmas. And sure enough, midnight of Christmas Day, so not Christmas Eve midnight, but the midnight on December 20, that was at the end of December 25th, we came to work the next day on December 26th, and that door that Chuck standing by was actually nicely shut. Everything was great, except the clock wasn't telling time. And we took a look at it and noticed that someone very carefully, someone with great, I'm guessing, Chuck, with great knowledge of what they were looking at.
Well, they had to know something. I mean, they had to know how to get it out of there by cutting the drive shaft off and by cutting the cables for the weights.
So they did it with that. They had the tools to do it. They did it with precision. They did no damage whatsoever to the rest of the clock. They did not even so much as scratch the glass. They left the door nice and tidy, and But we realized right away that that was going to be a giant challenge for the
Did
future.
they take the whole pendulum with them?
Chuck, remind me, what did they take?
I think they did. They took
Yeah.
the pendulum and the movement.
I think they were metal thieves.
They were metal thieves for sure, but they seemed to understand about the clock mechanism much more than we did at the museum anyway. But we worked with Pete Sorson, who you guys know from Port Townsend, we worked with Chuck, and it was and we worked with our insurance company and with the city, local police, and with all this great work with Chuck and Pete, we were able to get it back in operation. But at that point, we knew that we had a treasure here that we had to be extra cautious of. So we installed immediately what we should have done a long time ago, 24/7 security monitors and so forth. And since that time, it has not been damaged. Then we brought it down here, and I think the concern down here was suddenly it was going from a more obscure location where, you know, we were concerned to be out of sight to a very prominent location where there were eyes on it all the time, 24-hour security, lots of people looking at it, really a landmark on the landscape. But would it become a popular target for vandals, for kids, for people who just wanted to leave their mark? And I'm happy to say, and this is often the case with public art and great historic things in public, somehow people seem to know that these are things to be treasured and respected. I don't know, you guys are experts on street clocks, but public art in Seattle seems to be pretty much left alone by the graffiti artists and by the taggers, and strangely, and that's been the case with Carroll's clock. So we've been here now almost 2 years, and we've not had a repeat of the damage. What we need to do, it looks like, is do a better job of maybe touching up the plaque, which looks like it's had a little weather damage being so close to the water maybe, and the vinyl sheeting that's on the glass, which is basically to prevent it from being scratched. Looks like we could probably spend a little bit of energy in replacing that and getting a clear one that you can look through more clearly.
Now, where was the clock between this location and the original street clock?
It was at our, and this is where it was vandalized and the parts were stolen, at our previous museum location. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting you guys aren't from Seattle. We are a very old museum, been around, actually this is our 100th year this year, but we're in a very new location for us. We took over this building at Historic Naval Reserve Armory and reopened as a museum in December of 2012. So we've been here for almost 2 years. Prior to this, we were for 50 years, 60 years, at a location on the very other end of this lake around the corner in a neighborhood in Seattle they call Motley, very close to the University of Washington. So we've moved it now twice in about 5 years. We had that one episode, but it's up and running, and Adam here winds it. How often? Tell them how often you wind it.
Once a week.
Once a week. And does it keep pretty good time?
Yeah. I've been adjusting how long the pendulum is, but every time we seem to overshoot a little. So 1 week it's a little too fast and then a little too slow. But I think I got it pretty close now.
What about lubrication? Do you have somebody who lubricates it a couple times?
I'll let Adam answer all those questions.
No, all we do regularly is wind it.
Okay, so that should be something that should be
Put
done.
a drop of oil in each of those bushings.
Yeah, at least twice a year.
Twice a year.
Okay, report that back to Chuck and make sure. Another Chuck, not this Chuck. But yeah, but you know, aside from the winding, it sounds like we did a little oiling, and we should probably clean up that glass. It really has, and it's quite wonderful because this location, of all the locations, is probably the most prominent now, because it was obviously prominent downtown, but it's a pretty busy street that you kind of whiz by, or you're walking by quickly or catching a bus. In the old location, it's
I'm sorry, remember there was like mailboxes and other things kind of crammed in next to it.
yeah, it was tight. It was tight. You didn't have a perspective on it. Yeah.